Hey, what's up, you guys? It's Mxiety. We are on today with To Write Love on Our Arms representative Chad. Chad, say hello.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you, and I appreciate the time you guys have spent. The time you guys have spent just in all. I can't begin to actually. I'm gonna be very stuttery because to write love on our arms, I think it means a lot to a lot of people. It certainly means a lot to me as somebody. Now the charity has been around. I don't know if you know the number off the top of your head. I don't. How long have you guys been around?
Yeah, we turned 13 this month. We are
13.
officially teenagers.
So that makes sense because you guys came around the time that I was in high school. Oh God. Oh God. Yeah. But I remember when the charity started and the impact that it had on just my mental health awareness, just the high school fundraising. You guys are so much more than that.
Yeah. No, it's wild. I often, when people ask how old we are, I generally say MySpace years ago,
Oh my
and
God.
that's how
No,
that's
that's
how
accurate. That's painfully accurate.
it is. I mean, we kind of grew up with social media. When this all started, like Facebook was barely a thing. You had to have a college email address in order to be part of Facebook. Twitter was just a twinkle in Silicon Valley's eye. And here we are doing something that I never thought would have been possible, which is having actual video chat with another
Right?
human being. Like this is this is amazing.
The leaps and bounds we've made in the past like 5 years are astounding alone. And then the further you go back, the more you're like, what? And we're doing what now? Yeah.
When
Uh
I started at To Write Love in Our Arms, I used a flip phone. Like
oh well that makes sense. That makes because I had a flip phone in high school.
yeah. So we've come a long way.
So how long have you been with To Write Love?
Yeah, so the organization, like I said, started 13 years ago. I've been a part of the organization for 11 out of those 13 years. So not on the ground floor, but certainly on the mezzanine level. And yeah, it's been wild. I moved down to Florida 10 days after graduating from college, and
Wow.
so yeah.
So what was that like? I mean, this charity approaches you. I mean, they're really not right. They're from what I understand, kind of the grassroots was going to high schools and fundraising that way to raise awareness and having people write love on their arms. And so, how did you decide? Yeah, sure, I'll join these guys. I mean, now it's just a
Yeah.
behemoth, but
Well, it's so funny, like how we think we remember things and how things actually are. Yeah. So for me, when I first found out about the organization, I was well. We'll start here. If you guys watching are not familiar with To Write Love on Our Arms, we are a nonprofit organization that exists to present hope and find help for anyone struggling with things like depression, addiction, self-injury, and suicide. And we exist to encourage, to inspire, to inform, and also to invest financially into avenues for treatment and recovery. So when I first learned about the organization in the spring of 2008, I was just kind of on my own journey and kind of climbing my own mountain of mental illness. All these words: depression, addiction, self-injury, suicide. They're chapters in my story. And when I first learned about the organization, I was just kind of starting to take my first steps into recovery. I was just really starting to get my life back together. And that's when one of my residents, I was an RA at the time, one of my residents was on the old MySpace page. He said it was cool and he sent me a link. And I was like, holy crap, like people are talking about things that I didn't think were fair topics of
right,
conversation.
right.
And at the same time, I'm reading stories that resonate with my own. So I had a mentor at the time who told me, look, the only difference between shit and manure is purpose. It just depends on what you do with it. Are you going to shovel it away? Are you going to run from it? Or are you going to allow some growth to happen through it? So a supremely truncated version of the story. I wish I could say To Write Love was looking for me, but I was looking for any opportunity to help them. So it started by just kind of grassroots volunteering, passing out info cards on my college campus. Then I just took a shot. I sent a cold call email just saying, hey, I'm about to graduate. I would love to give you guys my time until I'm out of money. And
Right.
they said, we would love to have you. So at that point, the organization full-time employed like 5 people. And I went down to be a part of the very first internship program. There were 16 of us living in a house and just answering messages from dawn till dusk. And here we are today. So
Wow. Wow. So it was, I mean, the super truncated version is that it was purpose. It was trying to find a purpose. Yeah.
totally. It was, I remember what it felt like. The silence around my own story was
Yeah.
deafening in its own right. And, I figured if I could help anyone kind of come to terms with their own life, with their own story, if I could help anyone connect with someone else, then that's going to be a beautiful story worth pursuing.
That's amazing because that's how a lot of these advocacy stories. I mean, that echoes. I am no to write love on our arms, but that echoes definitely why I started this channel and wanted to have these conversations and the podcast and the talk show and everything. So that's just like it's awesome to hear, and it's fascinating to me how a lot of healing from mental illness is helping others. Like that's the common denominator that I've kind of found, and
Yeah.
it always blows me away. And it's one of those things that like is it's half a duh and half of a oh. So if I help others, it makes me feel better, and like I have a purpose and a thing to bring forward. It's really neat.
Yeah. I mean, I think again that points to a much bigger conversation of, when you say something like mental illness, or even take the more positive term of mental health, that seems like so often just a closed door of conversation right there,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate because in my 11 years of doing this job, I've never had to convince someone that depression is real, or that addiction is a problem, or
Yeah.
that we need to find more creative ways to deal with the suicide epidemic. But what I do need to convince people of is that, look, your story deserves an audience, that you're not alone, that people get this. And, everyone has a friend, everyone has a family member, everyone
Yeah.
has their own story. So for us, it's turned into a question of, all right, look, if the words are scary, like depression, addiction, self-injury, suicide, if that's too difficult to talk about, then let's, find a different layer to this. How are you today? What are your fears? What are your dreams? What's driving you? Where are you feeling most alive? So let's talk about life. If you don't feel qualified to talk about psychiatry, then don't. Let's just talk about being a human, which we all know what it's like to be a human, right?
That's amazing. And that's such a valid point. That's something that I worry about a lot, and just in general, I know advocates struggle with was A, I'm not qualified, and how do I talk about it? And B, how do I talk about it without scaring people away? And like you want to invite more people into the conversation than are willing to talk about mental health, and I love that. I love that, approaching it from the perspective of mental health is just like you living and being alive. So if you could talk about it from the point of like, hey, how's your day, then cool, then you're doing it
Yeah.
right. um I I think I'm gonna take a second to share my own story with To Write Love. I think, and if I have shared it with the audience, I don't think I have, but guys, bear with me. Everybody, bear with me. But I remember a kid came up to me and he had love written on his arm, and I was like, that looks really interesting. And he's like, oh, yeah, well, this is for a campaign. And I was like, well, what is that? What kind of campaign? He's like, oh, yeah, well, if you donate money and you write love on your arms and you continue the conversation because, hey, why would you write love on your arms, et cetera, et cetera. And the conversation is this in the background. I don't know that I like. I don't know if it's part of your narrative to tell like the story of how To Write Love started, but the story that I know was that uh without me going into it, because that's your story to tell. My story involved hearing that story and just being taken aback by the idea that like somebody would care. And that was, I know that was part of the message, and there's so much more there, but just the fact that somebody would care if something happened to me, if I had acted on the actions that, on the thoughts that were going on in my head at the time. And it's not that I like opened a dialogue even with the kid that I was talking to about, you know, him having love written on his arms. I wasn't ready to talk to him about it, but just the mere fact that like, oh, these thoughts in my head, they're part of something bigger that people are talking about, and that validated them enough, and that validated my emotions enough to kind of think about it from a different way. And so I do think, can you give us a little bit of a background on how and what started To Write Love?
Absolutely, yeah. So To Write Love on Our Arms began without a business plan. It began without any idea of what this would grow into. And it began really humbly, really just as trying to help a friend and tell her story. So when I say her story and when we say To Write Love on Her Arms, there is and was a literal her to this. It was our friend Renee. And 13 years ago, Renee's story was one of cocaine addiction and self-injury. The story goes is that she was ready to make a change. She was ready to find, you know, some avenue towards recovery. But before she was going to start that journey, she decided that she needed one more night, you know, just kind of go out with a bang in a sense. And she stayed at a dealer's house that night. She used cocaine one more time, and she locked herself in the bathroom. And with a razor, she wrote the word "fuck up" across her arm. The next day, she went to enter treatment, and they actually turned her away due to the drugs that were still in her system. That treatment center didn't have a detox unit. And they said, right now, you're too great of a risk. But if you can get clean and stay clean for 5 days, then we can try this process again. So at that point, she took a really brave step. And instead of going back to her dealer's house, she crashed at a friend's place, a guy named David. Well, David was also in recovery, so he knew what the next 5 days were going to look like. So he called a bunch of friends together. They sat her down and said, look, we believe in you. We believe in recovery, but this isn't about you anymore. This is going to be an us thing. We're going to get there together. So for the next 5 days, this circle of friends took turns, you know, just sharing each other's stories, getting to know one another. If we can't talk about the big mental health issues, and like I said, we can talk about life. They went to basketball games and rock shows to keep her distracted. They got her cigarettes and coffee for the coming down. They got her books for the road ahead. And the entire theme was, look, you're not going to be doing any part of this alone. So over those days and nights, the idea To Write Love on Her Arms came out. The thought was what she put on her arm, that fuck up, it wasn't about profanity. It was about identity. So To Write Love on Her Arms was a goal that, hey, maybe together we could help her rewrite this script. So no, Renee, you're not your past. No, Renee, you're not your present situation. Renee, you're not your future. You're here now. You're still breathing. That's what matters to us. That's what we believe in. So at the end of those 5 days, David's roommate, a guy named Jamie, he asked Renee, hey, how would you feel about sharing your story? And she said, I think if one person could relate to this, then maybe there'd be a purpose for some of the pain in my life. So the next day, Renee checked into treatment, and Jamie sat down and wrote a 2-page story. He called it To Write Love on Our Arms for the same reason I told you. He put it on MySpace because it was 2006. And he made 200 shirts that said To Write Love on Our Arms on it. And the thought was to sell those to help offset her medical costs. Well, we had some friends in touring bands at the time, and they wore the shirt. And as they traveled, their fans got curious. They would look up the name, they would read the story, and they said, you know, Renee sounds a lot like my dad. And right. Renee sounds a lot like my best friend. Renee actually sounds a lot like me, are hope and help options for me as well. So we really grew out of a response to your response to a story that, you know, in no timeline did we imagine that it would turn into music festivals and t-shirts and Twitch and having conversations that we thought were impossible. And kind of what you said, like it boiled down to the fact that, wow, like maybe my life is something worth sharing. Maybe there is someone that I can connect to. You know, over the years, we found that so often people don't ask for help for one of two reasons. Either I don't know who to ask, or I don't even know if it's okay to ask. So we call that second point stigma, that,
Right.
if silence is the loudest voice in a conversation, then I'm convinced that we can do better. And that's where interviews like this come in. That's where stories like how you found out about the organization come in. So often people say that they learned about the organization through To Write Love on Our Arms Day, where people donated and wrote love on their arm. And the magic of that is that we did not plan that at all.
So I need to know more about that, because like that day changed the course. I would argue would change like I am sitting here today talking about mental health, arguably because of that kid who had a weird word written in pen on his arms, like usually kids have the word penis written down, or like something. It's a pen 15, right? Like it's definitely not
Right.
not love. And in that conversation, just that idea of like, you don't have to be alone, you don't have to be suffering by yourself, and more importantly, somebody out there cares about you. And at that moment, with the family that I was in, this was high school, so that message to me was louder and probably more important than anything. I had an eating disorder at the time. Actually, that was 2 eating disorders, because why stop at one? And just the whole notion that like somebody out there was going to care if if uh if anything mental health related was happening in my life, that like I could talk about it. Just that alone was enough. I know I'm repeating myself a little bit, but still.
No, well, I mean, I don't think you can wear out the record of hope, right? Like,
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Oh my gosh, that's a quote on its own. The record of hope. I love that.
So I was just doing another interview a couple weeks back, and someone was asking me, what are the 10 things that you learned about mental health through working at festivals? And I was feeling a little bit cynical that day. So I'm like, all right, the number one thing is that we still exist. And then I just like threw it out there. And a lot of that was coming from frustrations of years on the road, and people are like, "Oh
Yeah.
my God, I can't believe you guys still exist. You guys are still there. I remember you from high school." And
Oh, that's
like,
not what you want to.
no, like we never. But totally. But then I realized, man, that's deeply impactful. Like I need to practice and receive that with gratitude, because what that's telling me is that they learned about us through someone that isn't us. They learned about To Write Love on Our Arms through a passionate teacher or coworker
Right.
or friend or family member. They never had a concept that we are still this growing, organized movement. So there's a lot of beauty in that it used to hit me as really bittersweet. Like, yeah, we do still exist. But now it's like, yeah, there's a world going on that you were now invited into celebrating with us. Not many things get to turn 13. But the only reason we got to this milestone is because of people like you and your friends that say, like, this is important. This deserves a signal boost. And so you boost the signal, and then you never know what kind of ripple effects can play out. I've been saying it for years that I'm trying to work myself out of a job.
That's my next question. That's my
yeah.
that's my next question, is like, how do you not get cynical about the fact that like, listen, we've been trying to break this freaking stigma for 13 years, and then there's kids like me coming around being like, I'm gonna break the stigma, and I just started doing this a year and a half ago. And it's not, maybe the conversation is still happening, but it's just as important. It was just as important 2 years ago when I started as it is 13 years ago. And how do you not get cynical about that? I totally, yeah.
Yeah, well, you lean heavily on the gift of perspective. That, Marie, it's not on you to end stigma. It's on you to challenge the perspectives of people around you in your immediate, kind of circle of influence. But we're never gonna do anything big unless we can do it well small first.
Yeah.
So, when I talk to people on the road that are saying, I want to, cure AIDS or cure cancer or fix the water crisis or
Yeah.
solve global warming or all that, I say, that's great. Like, where are you going to start? Well, I'm going to, start at the top, and I'm going to have this trickle down. I'm like, man, like these are things that should be practiced in your own backyard. And
Right.
dude,
Right.
it needs to be practiced in your own mirror, right? Like, I would burn out of telling people of the beauty that is their life if I didn't have people reminding me of how my life has impacted theirs, on a consistent basis. That, an empty cup can't fill up anyone else's. So much of it is about challenging perspectives and inviting people into the things that make you excited. So it's easy to get burnt out when your goals are so lofty that it's impossible to manage those numbers. But if I can count the amount of impactful hugs that I had at a festival, like, then it was worth it for me to be there. If I can count the number of resource guides that I passed out in a given week, like, that's something that's impactful. And maybe one day that will solve the problem of suicide or addiction or eating disorders. But I know I'm only really in control of what is immediately in front of me.
Right.
So solving the problem of suicide can wait, but having an impactful conversation with you right now, that's what deserves my attention. And, if I'm not going to do this well, then I'm not going to do the next 15 things well either,
That's so beautiful. Oh my gosh. And you responded to so many, because it's so many things that I personally worry about. Like, one of them is, am I selfish for when people tell me, hey, you did something and that really changed my life, that really helped me, that was really impactful on me. When I hear that, like, is that selfish to accept that? Like, am I doing that does that mean I'm doing it for the praise? And just kind of hearing you say, like, no, that's how you refill that cup so that you can keep giving, like, that connects a lot of things for me. So thank you.
Yeah, no worries. And I'm not going to pretend like everything that I'm saying is, a form of a gospel or something that, honestly, one thing that gives me hope is that over the past 11 years that I've been working for the organization is that my thoughts and attitudes have changed on topics, on things, on options for treatment, that I am still a product of growth. And that's something beautiful. Like, seeing some interviews that I did from 8 years ago and being like, man, like, that's really interesting that's the angle I took on that question. That's beautiful. Like, being able to mark growth. So I think that's a huge piece of it. But the easiest way to mark your growth is to have an objective third party celebrate that growth with you,
Yeah.
Having other people that know your story to celebrate your milestones in recovery or your milestones on your Twitch page. Like, I bet the people that have been with you from day one, they're going to celebrate when you hit, 5 years of streaming, and they're going to be just as stoked as you because they were there at the very beginning.
Yeah.
The same is true with your own story, that as soon as you let someone into your story, you are inviting them to cheer you on when you make it to a week clean or 2 months clean or a year clean or 2 weeks clean after my last relapse, so these are people that get to bear with you. And I don't even know what question I'm responding to at this point.
You're just responding, and I love it. I'm eating up every word. I know it's not gospel, and I know you're just like, you're a guy just like any guy, but you're saying a lot of things that are impactful, and I hope you guys don't forget, you guys can ask questions at any point in the stream. Chad's here to, is expecting to answer your questions. So anything that you're thinking about, whether it's about to write on your love on her arms or mental health awareness, ask away. It's what helps keep this conversation as brilliant as it's been. I think you kind of spoke to this, but in terms of, like, what do you believe the final goal is to write love on our arms? Because it doesn't sound like, we're going to break all the stigma and we're going to solve suicide is just not going to be existent. Like, is that the goal? Because that sounds, not just lofty, but that sounds really intense. So what is it?
Yeah. Well, I think the goal is connecting more people to more people.
Wow.
I think organizationally, we don't see suicide as the thing that we're fighting. We don't see depression as the thing that we're fighting, or addiction, self-injury, anxiety. You name the issue. That's not what we're fighting. We're fighting the culture that enables those things to thrive, which is that stigma, which is that silence, which is that sense of isolation. That all of those issues, they have a way of convincing you that you've waived your right to personal connection. And we're there to say, look, you can't do that any more than you can, stop being a piece of you, that that you deserve to have people in your life. So if that needs to start small, then start small. Maybe that starts with finding people on Twitch that you trust. And maybe you build on that courage and find a friend or a family member. Maybe you find a counselor. Maybe you find a mentor. And then maybe you find someone that you can mentor, someone that you can pass your wisdom along to. I remember speaking at a conference. This was probably 4 years ago, and I forget even the context of the conference, but this older gentleman, he was a doctor. He introduced himself to me as a doctor. He was there with his granddaughter, who was, probably 13 or so. They stopped by our booth. I tell them what we're about, that we're out there trying to present hope and find help for people struggling with depression, addiction, self-injury, and suicide. And he looks down at his granddaughter and says, "Well, honey, thank God we don't know anyone like that." And I said, "Well, sir, I don't know if that's
thank God that you're mistaken, sir."
Yeah. And I said, "Sir, I don't know if that's anything to be thankful about, because these people do exist within your community. That's either an indictment on the depth or the breadth of your friendship.
Yeah.
That no one is going to be immune to this. So the question is, am I making space for people to share their victories and their struggles with me?" And I look back to my earliest days in recovery. It was the first time I opened up to a friend about my self-injury, and I was convinced, like, all right, me opening up about this is going to be the death of this friendship, that I'm going to be too much for my friend. And I remember, like, she asked me, "Hey, I haven't seen you smile in so long. Why don't we hang out?" And
oh my gosh,
I take that as a challenge, and I'm like, "Look, you want to know where I've been? I've been taking a lot of drugs that were not prescribed to me. I've been drinking a lot. I've been hurting myself. I've been writing suicide notes and ripping them up. And, maybe this next one's going to stick." And then I just said, "Can I be too much for you now? Can you leave me alone?" And she said, "No. Like, what kind of friend would I be if I left you like this?" And the words that she said next changed everything about my life. She said, "We will get through this together." It wasn't, "I believe in you." It wasn't, "You can do this." But she inserted herself into my story and said, "Look, we are going to do this. That means we're not going to let you drink coffee alone. We're not going to let you eat alone. We're not going to let you do really anything alone, because you don't have to. So can you let me into the story?" So, what my friend was doing was she wasn't trying to fix me. She was trying to communicate that I was seen, I was heard, I was valued just as I was. And she was anticipating something more beautiful to come from it. So, yeah, the reason that To Write Love does what it does is because we've seen it work. We've seen that, look, you don't have to have a PhD in psychology to make an impact in someone's life. You just gotta, realize that there are parts of your story that are reflected and refracted among the other 7 billion people on this planet. Let's celebrate that common ground, and let's be honest with the places that hurt in our own life, so that we can be tender with the hurt in other people's lives.
That's so beautiful. The whole human connection thing, because people ask me, they're like, what is something that you've learned in your advocacy? And I'm like, that people just want to be loved, that people want to be heard. Oh, GL, thank you so much. And Javon, I also saw your subscription, and GL, thank you so much for those biddies. I appreciate it. He says, want to say that I'm thankful there are people out in the world that are full of compassion. It makes a big difference for so many, and much love. Thank you so much. But that's the thing that I share. I was like, everybody just wants to be loved. Everybody just wants to know that they're not alone and that there's somebody out there for them that cares. And that's it. And the other thing that when it comes to me is that it's not that hard to care. It's not that hard to give your time and attention to somebody who needs it. Even though it, we're all busy with our lives, even though we feel like, oh, I don't want this to become my burden now, or we worry that like, oh, this is biting off more than I can chew if I start helping this friend. Like, it's not about those big things where you're like, nobody's asking you to like turn somebody's life around, because at the end of the day, that's still on that person. But what does not hurt to do is just to say, I will be there for you, because you can. It's not that hard. Or I will show you in my, emotionally, I will be available for you in case you need somebody to talk to. Yeah, and
Yeah,
I
and
go ahead.
yeah, and then uh, showing that relationships in this world of what I said, 7 billion people, that relationships aren't just binary, that it's not just me and you, it's not just me and my friend, but maybe it has to start that way, but then we get to grow into these beautiful, just spiderweb mosaics of humanity that honestly, our lives are going to be made more beautiful um, when we have more voices speaking into it. And yeah, like for a long time, it was just that one friend that I reached out to. And through the courage of sharing my life with that one friend, I was able to invite a family member. I was able to invite a former roommate. I was able to invite just more and more people, so that the burden was shared to the extent that it didn't come across as a burden at all. It was just that's what we do. That's now how our friendships work, is that we're not just there for the superficial. We're not just there to talk about the weather, but we can talk about real life and questions and doubt, and not explode or be sucked into a black hole. That if you can find that you survived your first real talk, then that gives you courage to have another one down the road.
Yeah, I love that. Well, so what do you say to people who, I mean, not everybody can handle those conversations. Not everybody's ready for them, right? Like the guy who told his granddaughter that, like, oh, well, we don't know anybody like that. We must be very fortunate. And to talk to that guy, I don't know how many how many people may have at some point talked to him and said, hey, I'm not really feeling well. And then he was the guy who said like, yeah, but you'll be fine, or whatever else
Yeah,
that's kind of
like
dismissive.
bring up a great point that that a recovery journey is not always going to be a linear one. That there are going to be times that you share and it won't be received with grace, but that doesn't mean that every time you share, it won't be received with grace. So just because one time it didn't work out doesn't mean that it won't for other people. So like in the industry, we use the language of a treatment plan, which is to say it's not a treatment formula. A formula means that like it will work every time. A squared plus B squared will always be C
Right.
squared.
Right.
Well, people are a little more messy than math, So for some people, that's going to require finding a counselor. Sometimes it's going to require finding a psychiatrist. Sometimes that's going to require going to support groups. Sometimes it's going to require finding new friendships and stifling some other relationships that weren't healthy for you. But again, you don't have to be making these decisions all by yourself, that there are people that have dedicated their lives to making sure that you're making the wisest decisions with the information that's been provided you. And I think that's another huge thing. Like it was something that I saw on Twitter of just the power of, instead of condemning someone for their choice, validating their humanity, saying, look, I can see that you are doing the best you can with what you have. And that is so beautifully human of you. And, just really resting in giving yourself grace that like, again, there are so many people with so many nuances in their story. Not everyone is going to understand every single bit of it. But that doesn't mean that you don't deserve to be known, that your life does not have to be polished before it can be shared. So we do have places on our website that we recommend starting that journey of sharing your story. Actually, one thing I'd love to introduce to you and your audience is
Go for
our
it.
Find Help tool. Actually, we had just launched this at TwitchCon, and I think we're able to walk you through it. But if you go to our website, which is TWLOHA.com, in the upper right-hand corner, you're going to see a blue button that says Find Help. If you click on that button, it's going to take you to another page where you can search for mental health resources by your zip code. So you can type in the level of care you're looking for.
That's amazing.
And type in your zip code, and up will pop a list of mental health resources, and geotag. There'll be a map. You can see exactly where these places are, and these operate on affordable levels. And yeah, you get to build out what the next step looks like for you. And quick disclaimer, I always like to dispel a myth about counseling whenever it comes up, is that not every counselor is a perfect fit for every client.
Yes. Oh my gosh. We talk about that a lot. Yes.
Yeah.
It's the hard part is when you're vulnerable, opening yourself up to a new counselor, or when, again, when you're vulnerable, maybe having a bad experience and then being willing to open yourself up and go back, because that's the hardest part, is once you get burned, that experience gets, literally singed into your mind in some ways. And then it's really hard to go out there and look for somebody else. But that is something we emphasize here.
Yeah. Some people find a good counselor on their first go at it. For me, I did not. And I thought that I was just too screwed up to receive help. And in reality, I just needed someone that saw the world in a more similar way that I did. And even then, the first counselor that I saw that I really fit with, I don't know if I'd fit with that dude now. And again, that doesn't make him a bad counselor or me a bad client. It just means people grow and people change, and you deserve to have someone respect the changes that are happening in your life and your neurochemistry and the ways that you're seeing the world. Like, I'll stop there. But.
No, you don't need to stop anywhere. You're doing great, and I'm absolutely loving it, which means I'm sure that so many people. And GL is saying, like, I think I needed to hear some of this tonight. Just a nice reminder that there are others out there supporting and are compassionate, topics and things I've heard before, but it's always good to refresh and hear again. And I wager to say it's been even true for other medical type professionals in some ways. Like, I've had a few psychiatrist docs that for some too distant or didn't listen what I was trying to tell them, but I've been finding over time others do listen. But they might have not listened to you, and then the person that came in, they might have, that's exactly what they needed. And it's a hard, all of it's a hard fit. You're literally taking somebody and going, can you fit into my brain chemistry exactly the right way? I mean, it's hard enough to find like a significant other, and finding somebody who meshes with you on that level emotionally. And I like what you said, in a neuro level. I think that's really cool, and that's really important. Yeah. Yeah, and we are messy. Like your guest said, it's messy. Humans are messy and not exactly linear. Yeah. What do you think? We are coming up to the end of our time, which I can't believe. So you guys be sure to ask your questions while we have chat here. But so how you answered that, and what do you think is the hardest thing? I was like, not even midway through the question. What do you think is the hardest thing to explain to others, like to get them to understand mental illness?
Yeah, I mean, I think so much of it is just challenging language and challenging how we perceive different problems. And I don't think that's necessarily unique to mental health. I mean, the way that we treat the common cold is very different now than we did decades ago. I think so much of it kind of comes down to finding and being aware of our own blind spots cognitively when we discuss mental health. That, they are still giving out doctorates for for counseling, for neuropsychology, for all these things. Like they're still passing out degrees because there's still more to learn. There's still more research to be done. So I doubt that anyone, whether you're 13 years old on social media, or if you have been working at a cubicle job for 45 years, that you don't have all the answers to what unlocks someone's brain chemistry. You don't have all the answers to solve all the behavioral and emotional health issues that we encounter. So I mean, I think so much of it is people have been programmed to give quick answers to deep questions because it's uncomfortable to go deep. It's uncomfortable to say I don't know. It's uncomfortable. Like even that phrase I don't know is it shows some echoes of shame and vulnerability, that it's okay to not have everything figured out and everything on a bumper sticker type of theology of of how.
Oh my gosh, because there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that. As much as it's helpful, it's not too.
Yeah, so and I think the best ways to institute change linguistically is to do so with grace, that you don't have to beat a war drum in order to grab someone's attention. So when someone talks about someone just killed themselves the other day, and it's like, yeah, man, I'm so sorry to hear that person died by suicide. Just a simple way to steer a conversation back to a place of dignity.
Yeah.
I saw there's a very popular author and Twitter personality named Matthew Haig. I hope I said his name right. But he was responding yesterday to the lead singer of The Prodigy, who had died by suicide.
Yeah.
And he just took to Twitter to kind of flesh out some of the arguments that he'd seen, just people with their quick answers to deep and heavy issues.
Yeah.
And he said, look, I can't sit idly by and see people say he was too beautiful for this world. There is no such thing as that. Like, we can't treat people who are gifted artistically or creative, we can't diminish their pain. This is someone who died because of an illness illness that is treatable. So I mean, so much of it is again, going back, is what we said at the very beginning, honestly, is about centering people amongst the tapestry of mental illness. That for me, dealing with self-injury, I remember I was probably 5 years clean when someone said, I'm sharing my story, and they're like, oh, you're a cutter? And I'm like, no, but I did struggle with self-injury. I'm Chad. You know me. Like, you don't need to make a new label when I've already given you my name.
Shit.
So much of it is, like I said, if you don't have the vocabulary to talk about mental health, then just talk about life. Let's talk about the things that keep us up at night, whether they're scary or whether they're great. Let's talk about the growth that we've seen. Let's talk about journaling. Let's talk about the places that we find inspiration. And then maybe we can stumble onto some of these bigger mental health topics and linguistic barriers. But yeah, I going back on this. So I remember the first book that I read about self-injury after I had started my journey towards recovery was written by this guy, Stephen Levenkron, and he kind of literally wrote the book on self-injury. And I remember reading the introduction, and it said, the self-harmer is an adolescent female. And I'm like, whoa, then what am I? Like, because I didn't start injuring until I was an adult, and I have never been a female. Like, I don't, it sucks that my story does not fit within this doctor's parameters. Right. And then I look at the front of the book to see when it was published, and it was like in like the late 70s or early 80s. And I'm like,
yikes.
That's something big. Like, we have come so far. And we need to allow for more space for that travel. Like, I don't think we're ever going to solve the problems of self-injury or addiction or suicide, but we can reframe the conversation to invite more voices in, get a bigger data set so we can figure out what forms of treatment work. And that means, by necessity, that your story is important, not just to the people that love you, but to the people that will come far after you, that your story needs an audience because there's going to be someone 60 years from now that knows exactly how you feel, and you're going to be able to make them feel more seen, more heard, just by sharing your story with counselors and with professionals, with friends and with neighbors, that you're not just a blip on the radar. You are someone's lifeline today, tomorrow, and 50 years down the road. But we can talk about time travel next time you have me on. The new Avengers movie. But yeah, like we are all in this together, and that includes people that aren't even walking this earth yet.
Oh my gosh. It's beautiful. It's beautiful and wonderfully poetic. So if you guys don't have any questions, I want to just make sure I'm reading through the comments and start process. Oh, Audie Freak, I'm so sorry. You've been going through such a hard time, and only thing that did, oh my goodness, with the sticker, the book that I sent you and the sticker's the only thing that didn't burn in the fire, and I felt like everything didn't matter since I knew I had the best community ever. Oh, that's Audie, that's an honor, and if there's anything that we can do, we're all here. We're all here to support you as much as we possibly can. And Aveen said, yeah, so many of those things were published so long ago. Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing what you have with us. You guys absolutely do not forget to follow To Write Love on Our Arms everywhere and all over the place where you're interested in social media. They also do have a channel here on Twitch, so you be sure to check that out. Do you have any closing remarks for us, Chad? Any other notes that you'd like to make sure came through?
Yeah, I definitely do. A couple things: that if you are someone who is passionate about continuing these conversations, and if To Write Love is a place that you think is doing it in the right way, and you want to lend your voice and lend your efforts to us, we definitely have ways for you to get involved. So first, if you are over 18, we do have intern opportunities available. So if you go to our website and click on the jobs tab, you can learn about how to apply for that. Secondly, we're new to Twitch world. So if you guys have pointers on how we can Twitch better, how we can continue this conversation and continue to do good better, send us an email. So just info@TWLOHA.com. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to pick your brain. Thirdly, kind of going back to treatment, I know we mentioned counseling a lot, and I know that oftentimes that's a conversation of privilege, that not everyone has access to those means of finding a counselor immediately. If that is you, if that's the case, there still are options for you. A great place to start, if you have a phone capable of text, anytime, day or night, you can text 741-741, and that'll get you connected to our friends at the Crisis Text Line. And they're there to help you navigate whatever it is you're walking through. Our website also has some other 24/7 hotlines and chat lines should you need that. But if you don't have a counselor right now, that doesn't mean that you are that there isn't a treatment option or crisis line available for you. You always have options. I think that's all the housekeeping stuff. Oh, one other thing. We are in the final 40 days before our 7th annual 5K event. So this is a super awesome fundraising and advocacy event where we have a run in Satellite Beach, Florida. So if you live in Florida, come out and visit us. If you don't live in Florida, we have a virtual component. So last year we had people in all 50 states, and I think it was 16 countries, running on the same day within their communities to show support for people that that live with mental health challenges. So we call that the Run For It 5K. If you go to our website, you'll see neon green buttons. Click on those, and that'll get you to the right info. But yeah, we're passionate about creating an honest conversation within our communities. And if we can't always make it to your town, we can certainly equip you and the places where you live to connect more people to more people.
That's awesome. Oh, Peregrine, that's amazing. Just signed up to be a virtual participant for the 5K. Heck yeah.
It worked.
It worked. Just talking about it, just even if it's just one person, that's amazing. That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Are you sure you don't have anything else? Because apparently people are on a roll.
Yeah, that's all I got. I'm happy to stick around for one more question. And then my dog needs to go potty.
Oh no! Do you guys have any other questions? Wish there were more organizations like this in the UK and Ireland. There are quite a few. You guys in the UK, I actually feel like there's quite a few out there. I unfortunately do not have them collected in my wonderful resources page, and I'm really sorry about that. But
cool. We do have options for that too.
Oh, okay.
First and foremost, to Write Love on Our Arms, we are a global movement that we don't claim to have a monopoly on these issues, nor do we have a monopoly on the idea of hope, but we do know that our name carries with it some social currency. So we do offer ways for folks that aren't in the United States to continue to be involved. And we do have resources to international crisis lines on our website as well. So if you go to that Find Help page again, scroll down to international, and you'll probably see your country's flag there. And these are places that if you're curious about how you can help others, they can definitely point you in the right direction on how you can further the conversation for mental health within your own neck of the woods or neck of the globe. But yeah, we love our international supporters, and we can't wait to get back on the road to see you guys soon.
That's awesome. Sith Panda, I just want to say thank you for all that you do. I volunteer at the Crisis Text line and give out your info there a lot. There's so much good stuff for people to utilize in their own pace, and I'm thankful that you are available. Thank you so much. Peregrine, it doesn't matter. One of those 5Ks you're running for TWLOHA, so that's a huge deal. And Plague TV, I want to give you a special thank you for everything that you, all the links that he's been sending me so that I can post them up. I appreciate it so much, dude. Thank you.
James is my hero.
I know, right? So he's gonna come on to the show as well because him and I are buds. Yes. So that's really exciting. Does he work for you guys, or does he volunteer? And then he works, right? He like works separately and then volunteers for you guys, right? Is that
James? He's just our Twitch guru. He's a supporter that said, I want you guys to be front and center at Twitch, and he's a volunteer par excellence.
He's wonderful. No, he's a wonderful dude. So to answer the question of GL, is there potential future interview? Well, we have James on soon, coming on. That's next month. And of course, if Chad would like to come back, we would love to have him back. Of course, there's always more to talk about when it comes to...
Don't you dare threaten me with a good time.
There's always more to talk about when it comes to mental health awareness. No doubt. An advocate, I know, right? Who would have thought on this channel of all the things? You guys have been lovely. And if there's, don't forget, you guys, this VOD is going to be available. It's going to be super interesting if you're listening to this. And this is the VOD, so VODception for you. But this is absolutely going to be available on YouTube till the end of time. So so if you didn't catch the whole thing, you can definitely rewatch it there. Chad, again, thank you so much for being here. It was absolutely wonderful to have you on. Everybody stick around. We'll be right back with more Mxiety. But for now, I always ask that our guests sign us off with there's a motto that we have that's when we don't feel well and we feel like everything is dark, and I encourage people to go out there and become that light, be that light to others, and be that example of how you wish people treated you. So when we sign off, I always ask our guests to remind everybody to be the light. So if you don't mind, everybody, Everybody, I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful night. I'll see you in a few minutes. And don't forget to, Chad,
be the light.
Wonderful. Awesome. I'll see you guys soon.